Just want to make sure. Alrighty, so I'm talking about navigating controlled drug use. So this is a topic of concern for a lot of people right now, mainly because people are having a hard time getting drugs to be able to handle their animals. And there are not very many veterinarians that are willing to do this kind of work because of the liability involved with it. So is that a little better? Alright, sorry about that, fellas. So there's not very many veterinarians that are willing to do this kind of work. So anyway, what I'm hoping that we get out of this is a way that we can have a working relationship. And it doesn't have to be with me, it can be with anybody, but I'm hoping that if I teach you guys how to be good clients, that your vet will want to work with you. So I am not an attorney, these are my personal opinions. I don't work for the DEA, I don't work for the state board, and so what I am telling you is my understanding based on experience, based on people that I've talked with, and so ultimately, if you expect a defense against, a law enforcement officer or one of the government agencies, whether it's the state board or the board of pharmacy or whatever, if you expect me to be your defense, it's not going to work. So consult a licensed veterinarian. Anyway, I'll let you guys just kind of read through those for just a second. Basically, it's dangerous stuff. So what are controlled drugs? I just want to quickly go over this. It's going to be a little boring, and I'm sorry about that. I can't help that. But you do need to know what the actual drugs are so that when you look at a bottle, you know if it's going to be a problem for you or not. Okay? So I want you to understand exactly what these drugs are. So controlled drugs, they are different from prescription drugs. Prescription drugs are drugs where basically these governing agencies have said, all right, we think this is a valuable resource. We don't want people to just misuse it because they don't know how to use it. So we're going to make these prescription. Okay, controlled drugs are prescription, but they are the next level of prescription. And the reason is because there's a high potential for abuse and addiction and diversion. Diversion is this magic word that they use anytime there is anytime you have a drug that was intended for something that goes for something that was not intended for. Okay, so in other words, I prescribed it out to your deer, you go use it on somebody else's deer. That's an example of diversion. Yeah, this drug was prescribed out for your kid's ADD, and he goes and gives it to his friend, right? That's diversion, okay? So I don't know why they did it backwards, in my mind, but number one is the highest. That's going to be like heroin, cocaine, things like that. And then it goes on down to Schedule 2. Those are the ones that are extremely regulated, but have medicinal use. Mostly where we operate is 3 and 4. And I honestly can't even think of anything that's in the Schedule 5, so I don't really know why they have it. So, the drugs, butorphanol. This is probably the most common one that most people are going to come in contact with. So all of your BAM type combos are going to have butorphanol. So if you're wondering what is it that makes it controlled, it's the butorphanol in there. The other drugs, I won't get into the details at the moment, but the other drugs in it are not controlled. They are prescription, just like butorphanol is prescription, but this one is the controlled. So Schedule 4, it goes up to Schedule 3, which we'll talk about in a second, but Schedule 4 is what this is. And it's stronger than morphine, so it's a pretty hefty drug. Midazolam is another one. So that's going to be like in your MKBM. Sometimes people, if you are a little bit more involved in handling animals, you might use midazolam to help calm animals down. It's really good with anxiety. Ketamine is the Schedule 3 that a lot of people use, as well as Tilazol. And it comes in a couple different names. Tilazol is kind of the name that people know the most. So Tilazol is tyletamine. You're like, wait, that sounds kind of like ketamine. It's because it is kind of like ketamine. It just happens to be stronger and lasts longer. So I know this does not have to do with controlled drugs, but if you're going to be handling these, you need to know what these are. Okay, these are your 2 reversals that are most commonly used. Ketamine and tyletamine do not have a reversal. So naltrexone reverses butorphanol, and atipamezole reverses medetomidine. Why is that important? Because if you get exposed, you might die. That's why. I accidentally got exposed once. I told Brian this story, but I darted a rhino, and the dart didn't go off, darted her a second time, right? So I knew the dart didn't go off. I have since improved, but I didn't handle it properly. When I pulled the dart out, it exploded right in my face, and it took me out. I was unconscious in about 40 seconds. And luckily I had people there that were able to administer drugs and save my life. But yeah, I feel pretty confident if I got hit by a 3,500 pound dose for a rhino, then it probably would kill me. Okay, so this drug here, so we have Franz here from Core. He and I got together and made Nox here. This is Blam. So of the drugs that are contained in it, butorphanol is the controlled one. Okay. So this is another mixture similar to Nox. It's called Remix, which again, butorphanol is in this one, but instead of azapirone, we have midazolam in this one. This is the ever so famous BAM from Wedgwood, similar combination, butorphanol. So when I say similar combination, so BAM, one thing a lot of people don't know is there's not just this universal worldwide BAM mixture, okay? Different people mix it at different levels. But if you start to modify your thinking as to just say, okay, the primary drug in this is medetomidine, okay? So think about, how might you remember that? Well, you have like MK, MKB, BAM, Blam, BLMM, ceramics, right? So like all of them have the M in it, okay? The M is medetomidine, that's your primary drug, okay? So everything else in there is geared to decrease the amount of medetomidine necessary to get the job done, okay? And that mixture is made by Wedgwood, previously Zoofarm. MKB, common mixture that's made by NextGen, which is now, I can't remember their new name. Mixlab, thank you. Oh yeah, I have it there, responsible. MK2, so basically the whole idea of having a MKB or an MK and a 2 version of that is it basically being double strength. So ketamine and butorphanol are the drugs in that. So I need drugs. What's the problem? Well, here's the problem. There's not very many vets that are willing to do the work. Okay? That's why, and I'm going to explain why. There's a very high financial liability. You want to know something silly? If I just write BAM on my documentation, right? I just BAM. It's around $16,000 for that fine for me. I'm not a bad person. I just wrote the nickname instead of writing the butorphanol, this many milligrams, azapirone, this many milligrams, medetomidine, this many milligrams, right? And automatically, they don't want to put me in jail. They don't want to take my license for that. They just want to get me on a payment plan. So high financial liability, right? So stupid little mistake like that, I get a big old fine, right? My medical records aren't right, big old fine, put me on probation, extra CE, right? Why? Because the stakes are high, all right? So when I say low financial incentive, you're like, your bill wasn't low. Well, compared to my fines, it was, right? The potential fines that I could face, yeah, it was. So as far as student loans, so the average veterinarian is coming out, I can't remember exactly how much it is, but it's around $200,000 to $300,000 in student debt. So how do I go to a new grad and say, hey, come work with me, come do some exotic wildlife? And it's going to take you, 2 or 3 years to build a business that you're actually proud of, and to get some experience where people actually have a level of respect for you, where you can actually make enough money to support your $3,500 a month student loan payment, right? When they could just go and do a $1,500 to $2,000 a day emergency room. Word's not coming. Whatever. I'll move on. So they could just go make easy money at an emergency room clinic, right? So it's hard for me to try and convince someone to do that. So already talked about fines. So risk of jail time. I mean, the risk, it's probably pretty low unless you're like really sketchy, doing some really bad stuff. But it's there if you are genuinely doing bad stuff. There is a. Oh, thank you. Yeah. So it is really low. So then I don't remember what the next thing was. Okay. I have been audited once, and I don't know exactly. So I have not heard of a ranch owner having a problem unless it typically gets led back to the ranch owner. So in other words, I haven't heard of like, an enforcement agency coming and saying, hey, Troy, show me your stuff, show me your documentation. What I have heard is, well, this bottle was prescribed to Troy Vaughn. Why is it in this young gentleman's truck? Nowhere near where Troy lives. Why is it over here in Harris County or Bexar County? Troy doesn't even live here. It's addressed over, Hondo area. I can't remember exactly where, but Uvalde, right? So why the heck is it in Harris County? And why do you have white-tailed deer in the back? Does that sound familiar? I'm sure you guys have all heard that story. So yeah, so that's what ends up leading. So then what ends up happening is they're like, all right, well, you're in trouble, felony. You're in trouble, felony. We know that you guys don't have anything to offer money-wise, so you're going to jail. Troy has something to offer, though. So they're going to go and cut you a nice suit deal and get you on a payment plan. Yeah, payment plan. So here's the deal. The historical structure of this industry puts my license at risk. This is how I operate, how my dad and I and our other partners own our veterinary clinics, and this is how I prescribe out drugs. The money that I earn with that is how I pay mortgages, how I pay for cars, how I save for college and retirement, right? And so losing our livelihood is ultimately what's at stake. And like I said, unlikely that it's actually jail time, but ultimately losing our livelihood is the big gamble. And if people don't cooperate with us, then one of two things is going to happen. Either vets are going to say, don't want to play anymore. And so, ultimately, if me, Pat, and a handful of others say, look, I don't want to play anymore, then it's going to drive a huge wedge into this industry and make it very challenging for people to do business. And if we're not the ones who say it, then the state board or other governing agencies that are relevant, for example, DEA. So when I say state board and DEA, just for now, just so I don't keep having to clarify that, just assume I'm talking about one or the other, okay? Because they'll kind of play in to how this is regulated. So right now, there's not enough veterinarians to physically do the work. You have a problem, no one's coming. It doesn't matter where you're from. So people ask me, oh yeah, I'd like for you to do my vet work. Okay, sure. Where are you at? I'm down near Alice. Oh man, that's really far. You know what? It doesn't matter because if I were next door to you on a holiday, odds are I'm gonna be busy. And you're the vet that's down the road is probably gonna be busy. When you're there with your family and you just say, oh man, that steak was thin, you need to do something about it. And we need to have a plan and already have steps to take for you so that you can be successful. Because in that specific moment, when you see that your deer has a big thing of baling wire or he's locked up with another buck, no one can be there right then. If you want to have a chance to do it, then you need to get competent at doing this. And so ultimately that kind of takes us into my final point, which I'll make in a second, but most vets don't know how to do this work. They know how to do a certain set of work, but I did not learn how to do hardly any of this stuff in vet school. I connected with Walt Cook, who mentored me when I was first starting out at A&M, Dr. Blue, Alice Blue, helped me some as well, but a lot of it came from Dr. Cook, which then, I took and ran with and eventually got connected in South African channels, right? So a lot of this stuff is word of mouth. So how can you establish a standard of teaching these people when a lot of this stuff's not even written down? It's just, you just know it, right? Ask Tad where all his doses are. They're right here. So movement of these animals will be more restricted if vets are the only ones that are doing this, right? So if you say, hey, I need to move this whatever, and I say, okay, I can come next week on the 17th. That doesn't work for me, or for you in this case. That doesn't work for you because maybe you have another commitment, or maybe that guy can't take delivery on the day, right? Anyway, more restrictions on it. And so then wouldn't have access to timely care, and ultimately what does that translate to? You're going to have a higher death loss because you're not going to be able to solve problems when you have the opportunity to, because you're the one that's there. Now, the key influencers here, bad actors and ignorance, and I am going to assume that we don't have bad actors in this room, so I'm just going to move forward and saying that if someone did something wrong, that it was just ignorance and that you're a good person, you just didn't know. And I'm not going to say that's okay in the sense like let's just excuse it. I'm going to say that's okay in the sense I don't think you're a bad person, but let's improve.
Sam, I want to add one thing.
Yeah, please.
To that. So when you're talking about, if you'll go back to that slide for just a minute.
Maybe.
There you go. Where he's talking about the key influencers of the problem. And he's got these two things here. These are kind of negative perspectives, but there's a positive perspective as well. Our industry has exploded with growth. It's huge. We're a huge industry today. And when you're a nothing, when you're just a little sleepy industry, nobody really pays attention to you from a regulatory standpoint. You can get away with a whole lot of stuff. But the minute that you become significant and meaningful, and there's huge amounts of money pouring into the industry, and there's stakeholders that are involved that are significant, and there's lots of activity, and there's all sorts of different markets developing, whether it be Chandler flying helicopters or whether a trap's being made, it doesn't matter what it is. But one of the reasons that our industry has a spotlight on it as it relates to this subject matter is because we are something now. We are a real industry that's making a difference from an economic standpoint in this state, and the regulators in this state are now forced to look out for the public interest. They have to make sure that what we're doing is not going to kill people, it's not going to defraud people, it's not going to cheat society out of some tax that they're supposed to get, and it's not going to give veterinarians like Sam, as an example, a way to go do things that they shouldn't be doing. And so we have grown very comfortable with the fact that we have access to these drugs to go out and catch animals. Back before I got into this, people used Secostrin, which, you got made fun of if you were using BAM because the old guys used Secostrin. And so, there was this whole thing around that for a while. But this has gotten, I don't want to say easy, but because the drugs that we have make it a little bit easier to catch animals, you have lots of people with no experience whatsoever, me being one of those when I got started doing this, getting controlled substances, going out shooting dart guns, and catching animals. And so here we are in this situation where we've got this robust industry that's growing, you have lots of people getting into it, and there is no barrier to entry. In other words, me, a high school dropout, or some other guy that just got out of high school can go out and get a dart gun and get a truck and get a trailer and start playing in this game. And that produces a very risky outcome. It's a very dangerous situation when you have inexperienced people that are not getting drug tested, that are not going through any type of education, they're not going through continuing education, and there's literally no oversight. Like none. Like when the drugs are prescribed, you have them. And so when he's talking about the key influencers of these problems, well, the outcome of all these things that I just said is not that they come after me, it's that they go after him as the veterinarian. He's the access point to get the drugs. And so it's not like I've got a game warden necessarily coming after me or our staff. They might question us. But what happens is the vet board, which is a governmental agency that regulates veterinarians, suddenly starts giving him grief. And maybe they're giving him grief over things that aren't even in the rules. They may not even be true. It may not even be a real regulation, but they just decide.
A new interpretation.
Yeah, well, you have some new guy that's working in the enforcement division, and he says, I'm going to interpret that animal transport is not a medical procedure. Well, to get a drug, you have to have a medical reason. There's got to be a valid medical purpose. And so transport may be interpreted that that's not a medical procedure. So now, instead of coming after me, because I'm operating legally with a prescription, they go after him. And if you've ever been in an industry that's regulated, where you have government regulation breathing down your neck, once they decide to focus on you, they generally don't let up until they get you on a payment plan. And I hate saying that that's reality, but in many cases it is. And so they don't, the vet board doesn't have to really answer to anybody unless Sam decides, you know what, I'm going to fight them and I'm going to take them to court and I'm not going to let them do this to me. Well, that's extremely expensive and it's also time consuming. And so when he's talking about the key influencers of these problems, we can pat ourselves on the back and say, job well done. We're somebody now. We've actually done something as it relates to an industry. We're meaningful, we're on the map, we're doing something great. And if we don't start regulating ourselves internally as an industry, what is going to end up happening is the very limited number of veterinarians that are giving us the prescriptions to go out and facilitate what we do, they're just going to stop doing it. And what are we going to do then? Like, what are we going to do when we can't get these drugs anymore? Are we going to go back to net gun, where we're just dropping nets on a kudu out of a helicopter and hoping we don't break their neck? It's a terrible idea. And the other part of this is that when you think about regulation and how it is that we have the ability to be impacted by government regulation, which is the biggest risk to any industry, there are people that don't like us. They don't like our industry. There are people that are anti-hunting, they're anti-captive breeding, they're I'm sure you know the names, PETA, so on and so forth. I can give you the list of them, right? Well, if they figure out that all they have to do is lobby the drug or the vet board to shut down 75% of this industry, and lobbying the vet board's not that hard. It's not that difficult. It's a very small number of people that they have to influence in order to have a very significant change. So while I do think that bad actors play a role and that there is some element of that, when we look at it from that perspective, when we say, oh, well, we're not a bad actor, I'm not the guy doing it, I'm not the bad actor, so I don't have to worry about that. Actually, we do. We have to worry about this from a broader perspective. While the bad actors play a role, the fact that we are really a great industry, we are the biggest contributor. Like, our success is the biggest contributor to the government regulation that we're facing now. And so I don't mean to beat a dead horse or sound my gong here, but it is the fact that we're succeeding that is creating the focus on this particular area of interest. And it's not going to go away. It's not going to go away until we do something to start regulating ourselves within our industry, or they are going to regulate us. And that regulation is here. It's already showing up. Sam, I can tell you, has felt it. There's other people in this room that have felt it. We have felt it. And it is a real issue that's here today. So I just wanted to add that, our success is playing a huge role in why this is so important that we start paying attention and we start addressing it. Because the last thing we want is for these drugs to be taken away because a guy like Sam is saying, look, I make my livelihood as a veterinarian, and if I write you a prescription for drugs for you to go catch animals, I may lose my license. That's the last thing that we want to have happen. So with that, I'll turn it back over.
Very good. So thank you, Ryan, for the additions. So this document right here, if this is a QR code, you can just point your phone at it with your camera on and it'll take you to a link. So this is a document that was released by the State Board of Veterinary Medical Examiners. It's open to anyone. I just tried to make it convenient for you to download. But so basically what they did, oh, sorry, we good? All right, 5, 4, 3, 2, next. Okay, so what they did was basically outline some specific things that they want. So without creating laws, they basically said, hey, look guys, this is how we're interpreting things. This is how we would like things to be done. But unfortunately, the challenge is that there's still a bit of ambiguity, that even when I try to talk to someone, they don't, at the State Board, they don't feel there's any ambiguity anymore. But between the Board of Pharmacy, which regulates who can compound the drugs and distribute those drugs, between the DEA and the State Board of Veterinary Medical Examiners, they have laws that conflict with each other. One says you can ship it to the vet if, one says you cannot ship it to the vet, you have to ship it to the end user, one says, anyway. I won't get into all that, but if you're listening to what I'm saying and you're finding, that seems a little bit confusing, it's not that I'm trying to be confusing, is that there's still things that need to be ironed out. It's not my job necessarily to iron it out. It's my job to do my best to comply and just really hope that I'm not the one who gets made an example in the process. So VCPR is veterinary client-patient relationship. So the whole idea behind that is they want me, a human, to go to you, a human, and work on, and see your animals, discuss your animals, and get a plan together and have a relationship at your facility where the animals are located. Literally boots on the ground, okay? So not cell phone, not email, not text, not FaceTime or whatever, right? So boots on the ground. Now, establishing the VCPR takes a physical site visit, takes some training. To me, one of the biggest things is I want to make sure you're not going to kill yourself or kill somebody on accident. And yes, on purpose too. If you give me a creepy vibe, we're done. But and yes, I don't want you to harm animals, so I do want you to be competent as well. And I got to document all of that. A lot of writing, a lot. I probably spend just about as much time writing what I did on someone's place, even though I use note-taking, software, etc. But I spend a lot of time writing. We have a phone conversation or text message exchange. I write it down. It takes a lot of time, and it always used to piss me off when I get like a bill, like, oh, I got an email from my CPA and charged me for it. So like, I don't do that crap. It's just annoying to me. So I just kind of build it all into the front and hope I don't get screwed. But so as far as maintaining the VCPR, we can maintain the VCPR remotely. That is acceptable. Now, what they say is that there needs to be regular communication. They don't say exactly how often, like was it once a week, is it once a month? To me, we need to have a story to tell that is logical. A human being will be the one that is looking at this information and saying, does it make sense that you prescribed out 10 bottles of whatever? Or does it make sense that you prescribed out one bottle, but in 3 different times, or whatever? Anyway, like, you have to have a story to tell, okay? And they have to be able to follow it, and it needs to make logical sense. Now, frequent prescriptions require more frequent visits. So is it like, well, you came out once, and I just need another VAMP kit, sometime later on in the year. As long as it fits within our plan, and you have animals to support it, and we can, logic our way through it, and we're maintaining the relationship, yeah, we can figure something out. Let's just get a plan together. But, one thing that doesn't make sense is, okay, this guy has 20 animals. We did, 2 bottles there, and next month 2 more bottles, next month 2 more bottles, next month 2 more bottles. And like, what is he doing? Why does he need that? Like, why in the world would you be doing something every single month? Like, what's the story here? And if the story doesn't make sense, we have a problem. We have a problem. So as far as medical reasons, so I'm trying to spoon feed this to you, okay? So don't call me and say, hey, I just sold my kudu or whatever, and he's fighting with this, or I need to, or whatever. I need to move from this pasture to this pasture, whatever your logic is, okay? Because they basically said capture and transport is not an acceptable reason to dart. And I get it. In your mind, you're like, well, that's most of what we do because we're having babies, selling animals, etc. Okay, if you are managing your herd properly, when you do get your hands on that animal, you will do things that are productive, okay? For example, look at that animal's teeth. See if you can get some age on it. See if you can feel how much does she have in there, any broken teeth, okay? No. Look at her hooves. Does she need a hoof trim or not? You don't have to trim the hooves, but look at them, okay? Look around the body for things. I know you're not a veterinarian, but do a basic medical exam to the best of your abilities. You notice, hey, that knee's bigger than that knee, okay? Maybe you need to medicate something, maybe you need to collect a poop sample, maybe you need to deworm or vaccinate or cut antlers, or maybe you're doing a more advanced repro protocol, maybe you're doing CWD testing. But either way, have a plan so that when you tell me, hey, I need to capture 4 impala, it's not capture and transport. What they have said is, yeah, you can capture and transport animals. You just can't dart them for that purpose. You have to do it for a medical purpose, and that capture and transport has to be incidental. So at the moment, until they make a law, that is how we are wording it. But again, I'm not saying go and just skirt the law and just say this. I'm saying properly manage your animals, and you will be within the law. And just document that you're actually managing your animals, and you'll be within the law. It's not hard to do. So another thing that has been clarified with that document that I sent you, or that I told you about, is that you can only prescribe the amount of controlled drug needed for that specific occurrence. So those bulk, just in case, or just if in case I need it, you know, I order 10 kits a year and that's what I go through, that is unacceptable now. They've clarified that you can only so you call me up and say, hey, I need to do this thing, and I can prescribe for that. We're doing an AI protocol, okay, I can prescribe enough for the AI protocol. Does that make sense? Okay, so that was a big change. That was well, I say change, however you want to interpret it. It was a big clarification for us.
How long did it take that?
Pardon me?
How long ago?
In that document, in March. Yeah. Was that March for this year? They clarified that.
So once you prescribe that, is there an expiration date associated with how long you can keep that controlled substance on the shelf in your at your range?
42 days?
It used to be 180, but
Used to be 180.
the FDA don't want compounding to exist. So they make, although we got testing 180, we are only going to allow up to 45 days expiration on the label.
Okay, so he's saying used to be 180 days, but the FDA has basically come out and said that they don't really want compounding for this sort of purpose, and so they've shortened the date to 45 days. So it's a month and a
They
half-ish.
see it as an emergency use. Emergency use.
So they're classifying it as emergency use, so it's a pretty short date.
So Sam, just to add to that question real quick. So in great detail, we're talking about state law and the vet board's interpretation of how it is that we're supposed to be dealing with controlled substances. And by stating that it can only be used for the specific purpose, at the federal law, under the Controlled Substances Act, they are saying directly to us, okay, through communications with DEA, that we cannot store a controlled substance that's been prescribed to us, that it cannot be stored. So the idea of you prescribe a drug for one specific thing, according to them, you have to administer that if it's going to be other than, like, let's just say as an example, I've got a kudu that needs to be caught that I can, for a hoof trim, I can administer that drug on a one-time basis, but if there's anything left in that vial, I cannot be in possession of that drug according to the Controlled Substances Act. I can't store that in my safe.
Yeah, so there is a disconnect between how we have been operating for many years and how the DEA and the state board are interpreting things, and so far it's my understanding that when you get the drug, you have some time to be able to make decisions, based on scheduling, availability kind of thing, but and that there's a bit of wiggle room. To my knowledge, I haven't heard. Oh, look at that! Somebody's making money. So
the reason I bring this up, and part of the reason that we asked Sam to come talk today, is that we have had some direct interaction with both the vet board and the DEA related to this subject matter, and everyone in here is familiar with in the law around marijuana. At the state level, it's legal in many places in the United States. It is illegal federally. So from a federal perspective, marijuana is illegal. From the state perspective, it is illegal. According to the discussions that we've had directly with the DEA as well as with the vet board, at the state level, we're allowed to conduct what's referred to as herd management, where we're written a prescription for drugs for our herd of Gemsbach that reside on our ranch, and that prescription can be written for up to a year. So we can have up to a year's worth of drugs in our possession, controlled substances, on our ranch because of herd management and livestock. That's a state regulation. But the Controlled Substances Act does not permit that. The Controlled Substances Act says that I cannot be in possession of a controlled substance unless it's just one specific thing. And other than that, the veterinarian has to be the administrator of that drug. And so we're not going to solve this issue today. I just simply want to bring it to your attention because if you have drugs stored at your ranch and they're Controlled Substances Act, there is a complete break in the law between the federal and the state level, and this has not been addressed, and it needs to be addressed. And so we had actually asked the representatives from the DEA that we had been dealing with to come and speak today, as well as representatives from the vet board, that they're not going to do it because they're not supposed to come educate us on the law. That's what a lawyer is technically supposed to help us with, or a veterinarian. But at the end of the day, this is a real issue that affects all of us individually, because if you've got these controlled substances on your ranch and you are in possession of them, there is a potential that there can be criminal liability that comes from that, even though they have been prescribed legally. And so
that kind of brings up a point that I think is relevant here, that Brian and I and others, Pat O'Neill and others within our network, are trying to get a working group together to be able to influence various associations and that have our interests in mind, your interests in mind, so that we can all work together. And right now, we're not ready to move, but there was going to come a time when we may ask for your support to say, hey, look, help us get this clarified. And that's not going to necessarily mean you being on Capitol Hill, but and we'll work on that. But that if at some point, don't be surprised, reach out, hey, support us as we're trying to get this dealt with.
And Sam, as a veterinarian, has a DEA license. So he's licensed both or he's a registered site with the DEA and is a vet. So he's dealing with both of these governmental regulatory agencies
That conflict.
that cannot get on the same page about how they're interpreting or how they're applying the law. The DEA has told our council they are going to apply the Controlled Substances Act, which says that we cannot be in possession of the drugs that have been legally prescribed to us. The vet board is putting out guidance to veterinarians, telling them how to go about prescribing them. And so it's a complete shit show, pardon my French, but that is in fact what we are dealing with today. And my message is, how do you think that leaves the guy with the license feeling? It doesn't leave him feeling great, particularly if there's any confusion about the way in which the drug is going to be used, or whether or not your employee that's administering it has been drug tested. All these various factors, there's lots of things to think about. Warren, you have a question, and then I'm going to give it back to Scott.
The thing I wanted to mention that I think you're being extremely kind is when you're asking for help. I think we're there right now. And I believe that very, very shortly, the only solution to this, because they like it in vigorous, they like the enforcement because they can tailor their investigations how they deem fit. So, and I'm with Westwood, I'm a guy with Alabama, but the reason I'm speaking on that is we're there right now because your next cliche that's coming up is where the problem really started that they built field loss, and that's traders and managers. And they got the information now they need. So your appeal to us, I would tell you, when you know that time's right, let us know, because we're going to have to get it clear or we're going to take it away from us.
Absolutely, and I mean, ultimately, it can become a very limited industry where only specific veterinarians willing and capable of doing the work. There's only going to be certain people that you guys trust to be able to do the work, and Pat and I can only teach so many people to do it, and so so the traders and the managers, that kind of work between a bunch of different ranches and just take stuff around. That has been one of the bigger sources of illegal activity, which I wish.
Going back to the 45 day window that you're spoke of, we have a law right now, the animal ID, what the dosage, what we did, when it was used, the lot number of batch, lot number of bottles, etc. However many kids at a time. In order to make sure the story and documentation matches, I need to make sure that I essentially
Yes, you will. Yes, you will. You are creating evidence against yourself. That's right.
The law doesn't require you to do that.
Yes, sir.
What scares me now, driving up here this morning, I had a call from that area. This is the usual call now. Warning's just not working to me anymore. And I hope that between your practice and our help that you need, we gotta have you guys. Because it'll ruin our business if we don't have you.
I agree. I mean, you know, and Pat and I are both in similar situations, you know, and the other veterinarians that I know, you know, we're doing this and we're involved because we love the industry, we love the people, we love the experience. I love getting to go out, you know, and as my kids get older, I want to take them with me to go and get involved. And so, you know, I don't want to get too derailed on that because there's still some important things we need to discuss, but I do appreciate your words, very kind, thank you. So yes, so Nash talked about documenting things. Right now, there's not a law that says you have to document. So I am required to document. The DEA, no ambiguity on that one, says that because of my license, I have to document where every pill, every mill goes. And so I do that, and I pay $1,500 a year to have software that tracks it and correlates between my software to tell me, hey, there's a discrepancy here, fix it, that kind of thing. And it eliminates a lot of the headache, but it's still a headache. And so, but as far as drug storage, so when you receive the drugs, the drugs need to be locked up. I went to somebody's place and they had it just sitting in the console of their truck, unacceptable. Had it sitting on a Lazy Susan there, that's unacceptable. I saw one place in the spice cabinet, that's unacceptable. Like, put it in a safe and until it's ready to get used. But then again, if you have a log and you received a bottle, and you know, lot number whatever, and they know that it was prescribed and it should have ended on May 30th, and here we are in August, and you're documenting that you're still using it, still in possession of it, you've just created evidence against yourself. As far as who an authorized person is that can be in possession of a drug, ideally it is the owner. I get it that there are many owners out there that they are the funds and the kind of motivation behind the project, but they're not the ones that are actually boots on the ground, darting the animals, managing the whole project, so they have somebody that's doing it for them. And so that does pose some challenges. It's best to avoid giving somebody, so for example, if you are the owner of those animals, it's best for you to be in possession of drugs on that ranch in your safe location, right, with a safe behind another door that's lockable, and to limit access to other people from those controlled substances. But if you have a ranch manager, then he'll need to be on that prescription. So we're going to put him on there and say, hey, this person is authorized to be in possession. Now, drug labeling, that's my problem and Fran's problem, but whose problem is it if it's not done correctly? Your problem. My problem, right? It becomes our problem if that label's not on there. And don't remove the label. For some reason, people, they start carrying bottles around, they take the label off. Don't do that. That's your proof that is your bottle. As far as food animal laws, why is that important? Because according to the USDA standards, these animals are not considered food animals, which is basically a cow, pig, goat, sheep, things like that. So these are not considered food animals, but they still, ethically, I am required, and according to the document that the state board released, required to help you abide by those laws, because we all know at some point a lot of these animals are going to get eaten, right? Maybe you're like, I ain't eating, whatever, Grim, Thunderstruck, whatever the cool name is you came up with. I ain't eating that guy, right? But so when does it come in? Okay, when you sell shooter fallows or shooter axes, and you're at the beginning of the season, and I got to get them now because they're coming to hunt next week. It is unethical for you to sell that person that animal and have darted that animal to move it to that place, and then for them to go kill it and eat it. Okay? What if a kid eats something that affects them, right? I mean, that's the situation that a lot of people get into. They're ready to capitalize, and they just want to dart that animal, get it to the new ranch so they can sell that shooter buck, and then somebody eats it.
Is your withdrawal period standard 60 days?
No, sir, that is something that I completely made up myself. I don't know exactly what the actual withdrawal time is. There's no established withdrawal time on any of these species because it's considered extra label, because it's not FDA approved for any of these species. And so who came up with the 60 days? This guy. And why did I do that? Because I wanted to do something that I believe the actual number is probably less than 2 weeks. But I don't know that. But just going and looking at how it eliminates in other animals, I think it's probably less than 2 weeks. So I was like, I'm gonna double that to 30, and you know what? I'm gonna do an extended, because that's what they say in the document that the Texas State Board released. They said we have to establish an extended withdrawal time. So I made up arbitrarily 60 days, and if it needs to be longer, then they need to tell me. But because I'm making an attempt to comply with that. So as far as the prescription, it must come from a licensed pharmacy to the end user. So to me, it makes the most sense for the pharmacy to send it to me, and then for me to hand it to you. But there's a well-known veterinarian that did that and almost lost his license. All right, and I don't want to get into his story; it's his to tell. But he almost lost his license, not Pat, but somebody else. Almost lost his license. And to me, that makes the most sense because I'm looking at you in your face, your eye, and I'm handing it to you. We don't have to worry about FedEx leaving it. You're like, why did you leave it there? It says signature. Right, but they do it, and so anyway, at the moment it has to go to you. So there has to be a place where we can ship this stuff to you, and unfortunately, that becomes challenging when you're like, well, nobody lives on the ranch. There's no address there. So we can't deliver anything there. Okay, well, we got to deliver it somewhere. Okay, so ultimately, what we've concluded is that we're going to deliver it to the owner's address, mailing address, so that it's actually safe. And if that is not possible, then we're going to have documentation that states that the owner authorizes it to get shipped to the authorized user. Who's that? Well, whoever's managing that for him. And I can bring drugs on the day of capture if I'm, physically there at the capture. That I'm immediately prescribing them, right? So that's another option to kind of get around that. So what do I need from you? Well, first off, you got to have some animals. You need to have legitimate activity, right? If you don't own animals, you cannot have a prescription. And it's not well, I went on this guy's ranch and I bought him, and then I went over to this ranch and I dropped him off. That is not how that is meant to work, okay? The way that they want it to work is it's going to go to the ranch that owns the animals before everything was done to them, before they were captured. Okay. Now, as we already talked about VCPR, gloss over that on this slide here. Site visit, we already talked about that. Safety training, talked about that. Medical management plan. Okay, I'm going to have an agreement, and basically in this agreement, and Brian's had a lot of input on my agreement to kind of try and create some sort of standard that we can offer, and Pat has had input as well. And basically what we're doing is saying, like, we're trying to outline all of these things that the state has said, hey, we want you to do this. And so we go in to get this agreement and say, well, how do you know that you're not prescribing out to a pedophile or to a rapist or a drug addict or whatever? Look, it's not my job to go and enforce the law on these people. Right? I don't have access to your personal prescriptions, nor do I want them. I don't know if you have a tramadol issue, right? And I don't want to have to look you up. And at the moment, veterinarians are not required to do that. And so, so basically, to protect me, I'm getting you to attest, hey, I'm not going to use this for diversion, which is using that drug in a way that's unintended or against the law, not on the prescription. I'm not a drug addict. I am not, or I don't have a felony, right? So, as far as what goes on the prescription, so what I'll need from you is a medication name, right? And odds are we're going to have already established that. We're going to talk about what we're going to use on your place, what you feel comfortable with. Ultimately, people ask me, hey, what's your favorite one? Look, man, at a certain point, you just figure out how to use all of them. And so it doesn't matter. You hand me a bottle, I can catch a lot of things with it. because I just know the drugs so well that you just kind of figure it out. And so, but a lot of people, they, oh, well, BAM works so much better. I've been using it for years. Okay, fine, use that. You feel comfortable with it. I don't want you stressing about the drug when you're capturing. You need to be focused on that animal breathing. You need to be focused on that heart rate. And if you're sitting there thinking like, oh man, is this a good batch, or is this too slow, or is this as good as whatever, you're not thinking about the important stuff, okay? So we'll get something that you feel comfortable with. And again, it doesn't matter to me, a lot of different combinations. I'm comfortable with almost all of them except xylazine and tinzol. I don't really care for that one. I need to know how much we need, and again, we gotta have a story, it needs to make sense. And then what species we're doing on, how many animals. Again, the numbers need to add up, right? So if you're like, yeah, I need 5 bottles and I'm doing 2 Dama. That math don't math, fella. And then what's the medical purpose? I gave you a list, right? So practice good management, you just need to tell me what the reason is, right? We're collecting samples, we're vaccinating, whatever. And just communicate regularly. So what I do behind the scenes is listed here. I'm not going to go through it because I know that everyone's getting tired. I'm ready to go eat. But basically, this is what I do to try and stay compliant. Now, in that document that the state board released, they outline a bunch of different things that need to be done. So why am I telling you this? It's not your job to do this. It's my job. Right? Well, if you're working with another vet, it'd be helpful if you help them be compliant. Like, hey, I just want to make sure that we're keeping log of all this. Like, why do I have a GPS log? Because I want there to be proof that I was on your property. Why am I taking pictures? Why am I recording? I don't share that with anyone. Something that a lot of people are concerned about. All of our communications are protected by the Veterinary Practice Act. You don't have to worry about me sharing anything. When I share stuff and I share personal experience, occasionally somebody's like, oh yeah, I didn't know that guy. He had problems with, foot rot in his place, And look, I can't get into details. I was just trying to share something that I learned that was important. I'm not going to confirm or deny. This is just how I have dealt with foot rot. Or, last month I dealt with a guy that had, this is a made up story. Last month I dealt with a guy that had lumpy jaw. Oh yeah, I heard about that. But can't get into the details like that. This is what we did, and this is what was done, and it was successful. Right? So I share experiences to be helpful. I don't share experiences like, oh, screw that guy over. It's like, no, look, I don't want to get in your business. I just want animals to be happy and healthy. And so, as far as getting a hold of me, this is my contact information. You're welcome to reach out. If you want my cell phone, I'm happy to give you my cell phone. You can shoot me a text. If you want, if you get your pen, if you plan on writing it, I can give you my cell phone. It's 361-219-8878. You're welcome to shoot me a text. If you call me, it kind of depends on if I'll answer. I'm generally pretty good at answering, but I'm really good at answering text. A lot of times I'll find I'm like in the middle of something, and so I can text really well. But I will always call back. But like I said, the goal here is to do our best to be compliant and hold ourselves to a higher standard so that we can set the industry standard for the direction that this is going to be going, because it's a pivotal point right now. And like Brian said, this industry is I call it pivotal, others may call it some sort of tipping point, but we got along for whatever 30, 40 years, about my lifespan, and with fairly minimal regulation. That's done. Like when I spoke with these the head of enforcement for the state board, they were pursuing felony charges on 8 people, and this is back in April. 8 people. That's a lot to me, and so, I think we're rooting out a lot of the bad actors because they're not willing to do what it takes to work with the few of us that are doing this type of work, and so hopefully that's one way to improve, and hopefully, I guess another goal here is that if we are doing something, and it's going to be unintentional, okay? But if we are doing something that the state or the feds don't want us to be doing, we want to be corrected and redirected. Corrected and redirected. We don't want like to go to jail, So Anyway, that is where we're at the moment. We're trying to hold ourselves to a higher standard so that, like I said, we can be corrected and redirected and not just fined. And so yeah, that's where we're at.
Great, thank you very much, Sam, really appreciate that. One more thing, and it's that WildLife Partners and my company putting on an event like this, we're not the only people that are expressing a voice. So our industry has an advocacy group called the Exotic Wildlife Association. They do take steps to go out and fight and try to make a difference from a regulatory standpoint. There's been some changes within the organization in the last couple of years that I think have been very positive. Next week, they are having their conservation extravaganza, and I think Sam, you and Pat are going to be doing a panel discussion about this subject matter as well. So where is that? That's in the Hyatt Hill Country? Yeah, it's at the Hyatt Hill Country Resort in San Antonio, and it's this coming weekend. So if you can make it to that, it would be worth doing so. And it really just comes down to making our voices heard. You know, we're stakeholders, and at the end of the day, we're the people that have massive amounts of money invested into this industry, and we are the ones that have the ability to get severely harmed in the event that these regulatory issues don't go as we hope that they go. And so we should be using our voices to influence these groups to try to get things done that need to get done. And there have been some positive changes here recently, like around sales tax, and they're working on issues around some of the endangered species and things like that. So the other area that I think that we can play a role is that veterinarians that are in school are not coming here. Like, they're not stepping into this industry. And there's a huge amount of money to be made for veterinarians that step into this space because there's such a huge lack of support. I have gone to Texas A&M. I think, Kevin, you guys went to Texas Tech? They went to Texas Tech. We're going to these universities and really pushing on the veterinary schools to start teaching people about exotic wildlife here in this state in the hopes that they will start producing more students coming out of school and coming into our industry to service what we need, because we just don't have them. They don't exist. I mean, there's less than 10 veterinarians that are proficient, and I'll use proficient as a really small word because it's not 10. There's 10 that provide services. There's only a handful that are proficient. And so getting vets to come out of school and come work in this industry is something we are desperately in need of. So creating scholarship funds in order to be able to encourage students to come in this direction, I think is a great thing to try to do. And if you're part of alumni of a particular university and you have some influence with that school, talk to the school about getting more people to focus on exotic wildlife, and there's opportunities for internships. I'm sure lots of you that own ranches would love to get some free interns to come out and work for a summer. And so I just think if we can really start working on these things and be a source of influence and pressure with these groups that are advocating on our behalf, our collective voice is much louder than mine. Although I'm pretty loud, I think if all of us are making a few waves here and there, it will be very helpful. So with that said, it is 5:20. And we can I don't know that we need to do a question and answer, but we can if you want. I have a presentation that I did last time about conservation easements, and I didn't know that Katie had queued that up for me to go over again today. Just by a show of hands, because it is 5:20, if there's people here that would like to hear me talk about conservation easements, I'm happy to do so. If everybody has had their fill, we can call it a day, and you can ask me individually, and I'll be more than happy to get you information. So let's we'll by a show of hands. Who's ready to go? Okay, well, there we go. I guess the rain is influencing us. So is it ready to go? We're going to do this conservation easement thing. Let's